Okay.
Yeah, so his MacBook Pro, hey everyone, his MacBook Pro is a desktop Mac now, basically.
Oh,
He
great.
he built a
Yeah.
little wood stand for it, has it sitting under the wood stand just so that he can get in there to turn it on and things like that. And then he's got a larger, I think, 24-inch display and then a keyboard and mouse connected to it. So now he's essentially a desktop Mac is what he's running now.
Perfect.
Let's see. I just got a message from Eric that he's running a little late. Let me see. I think he'll be. So it's interesting because I have let's see if I can. I have a full size keyboard connected to this MacBook when I'm sitting here podcasting,
Uh-huh.
but I always forget it's there. I always forget it's there and try to reach my hands under the microphone to type. And I'm like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
I've got a full keyboard right here at my fingertips.
Right. Right.
All right. Yeah, it's kind of weird because I messed up everything at Macstock when I was demoing this. All my windows I keep open and all that. Everything is okay. Now everything's back where it was.
Yeah.
So let's see. I'm going to change the output audio here. Oh, okay. All right. Eric said he's just going to be a couple minutes late, so we'll wait to start until he joins us. I
Sounds
am
good.
going to put my proposed title for the episode into the interview chat here, and you see what you think of this.
Okay.
I I don't know. I don't know. I always try to come up with something punny or something there. That's my proposed title right there.
Okay. I like
Will that
it.
work? Okay.
Yeah.
That's a it is now Brian approved. Oh, by the way, Brian,
Yeah.
next time I misspell your last name in the
Oh.
freaking schedule for Macstock, it was spelled correctly everywhere, and somehow I punched in two N's on the schedule. Say, dude, you misspelled my name in the schedule, and I'll have it
Oh.
fixed. But yeah, I messed that up. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no trouble. My name gets misspelled and reversed. Arthur's Flanigan. And when I was a little kid in school, I remember whenever we have a substitute teacher, they have the printouts of the attendance rosters,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there was, in the older computers, there wasn't enough characters and spaces, to put that many characters, and so you'd be like the substitute would be like, Arthur, are you here, Arthur? And I remember that little kid cartoon, that Arthur show on
Oh,
PBS or
yeah,
whatever, was so popular.
Arthur the Aardvark.
Aardvark.
Aardvark?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. And they would be like, "Hey, Arthur," and tease me and everything about it. I'm like, "Oh man." So yeah,
Well,
I totally remember names getting all goofed up. So
it was two
yeah,
N's versus one in the schedule, and I'm sorry about that. I'm like, what? Where the heck did that come from? Well, it turns
well,
out it was misspelled in my numbers spreadsheet. So
oh okay,
when I was, as you submitted talks for Macstock, I would take your name and your talk title and put it into this number spreadsheet so I can. Numbers is great because you can easily drag and drop rows around, and that
Mhm.
makes it much easier as I'm trying to figure out the best pairing for talks. Like, try to get, oh, okay, these talks will work really well together. These talks will work well together. So I can drag and drop them around and even drag them from one sheet to the other kind of thing.
Sure,
Well, apparently I didn't just copy and paste your name. I actually, I must
manually.
have just typed it in. And so
Yeah.
I hit two N's, didn't
Yep.
notice it. And then when I was putting together the schedule, then I was copying and pasting from the number spreadsheet into the schedule, and it just totally slipped my attention. But it was spelled right elsewhere on the site, and it was spelled right
Oh
everywhere
yeah,
else. It was just
no
the
trouble.
schedule. So I
Yeah, and
apologize.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, the two N's and an A is actually I think the most common spelling. So, um, yeah, no problem.
Brian Flanigan-Arthurs.
I've been called much worse.
Well, me too. And let's see, what was the other thing? Oh, yeah, you were talking about the number of character limits in the old,
Oh yeah.
computers and heck, even remember when they would give you the boxes and you had to write your letters into the boxes and you only had so many spaces to do it?
Oh, even hyphens. I'd always be raising my hand, like, do I? Because it wouldn't be one because you had to like bubble it then afterwards, and there was
Yeah,
no bubble hyphen, and so
no.
it would be like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to leave a space? Do you want me to mush them together? What do you want me to do?
What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
So I was wondering what was going to happen here, you know,
Uh-huh.
and Ecamm handled it properly. It just reduced the size of the typeface enough to make it
Oh, I
fit
see. Yeah.
within the box. But I was realizing as I was setting out to do that this morning that I had never put a name that long into the box before, so I didn't really know what was going to happen. But I think it looks okay.
Oh yeah. No, it looks fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we've
Yeah.
got
Definitely.
the Brian only one here. So
Okay.
got that. And then, yeah, there we go. And then our 3-up with our missing co-host.
Excellent.
There we go. All right. So we'll give him another minute or two, and if he doesn't pop up, we'll just start without him.
Right. And I'm looking here. It looks like so the comments chat. That's the one that incorporates YouTube onto Ecamm,
So
right?
so
And
you
then
do see that, right? Does it show you the public chats? There should be like a little tab to go between public chats and interview chat.
yeah, one says comments from live viewers, and then the other one
Wonderful.
says guest chat. Okay, perfect.
Wonderful. Because I've had people tell me they couldn't see that. I'm like, it's right there. It's up in the top right corner. So
Test.
yeah, we don't have anybody watching right at the moment, but
Let's see if it comes through. I wrote test in the YouTube. Oh,
oh,
yep, and there it is.
yep,
Perfect.
there you are.
Yeah.
And
Okay, so
then
that's how it
I can
appeared.
do this. Boom.
Okay, perfect. Nice. Yeah, that's some nice software. That Ecamm stuff is great.
It really is great. And okay, I do have it set to, I was playing with that during the talk, so I couldn't remember. So you can set it to show the last comment, and then over here in the comments and reactions, I can also do things like star it, and then say only show me those that I've starred, or I guess favorite it. They say favorite it.
Yeah.
Or I can just click add to broadcast, and it does the same thing that my little button here does. I can ban you. I won't do that, but
Thanks.
I can ban you. I can remove you from the broadcast. Boom. And then I can favorite it so that, sometimes you hear on YouTube shows, they'll say, oh, make sure you put a Q in front of the question so that we can spot it more easily. Well, if someone puts a Q in, I can search for Q colon, or I can just favorite them and then go to the favorites tab and pull up only those questions so that the other comments from the YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or Zoom or whatever platform you're using, they all show
Yeah,
up in here, and they show up for you as well, which is nice.
that's great. It looks so professional. Yeah.
Well, I need all the help I can get, Brian. All right. All right. Eric is still running late. So, what did he say? He said, hopefully just a few minutes, but I wasn't totally sure, so I wanted to make sure I didn't set you behind.
Yeah, and I'm fine. Like my stuff was mostly in the morning, so I'm
Yeah.
a okay. Yeah.
I'm sure you have other meetings and stuff this afternoon.
No, not nothing. So my schedule's clear. The last Friday it'll be clear in a while. Staff
I
returns next Friday.
saw that.
Yeah. Yeah.
No dates mentioned or anything, but it was today,
Yeah.
availability today, and then what was the next one? Like November. I'm like,
I
oh,
think,
good
yeah,
gracious. I gotta
yeah.
get them on now.
I've got there's a Friday holiday we have in September, but I'm at a conference, an econ conference that day and that
Mm,
weekend, and then I think the next one would be October, the fall break, sometime in October,
yeah.
and
And then
yeah,
January, and I'm like, oh, well, okay,
yeah,
this. And then, it sounded like Saturdays weren't really going to work particularly well either. So I thought, let's just see if we can make this happen. And the big issue was the delivery of that soda for my wife's shop.
sure,
And they, because it's closer, they deliver it to our home versus going all the way up to Woodstock.
yeah.
So, yeah, that actually came a little bit early, but it came at like 11 or 11:30, something like that. I'm like, well, I'm just gonna keep it 2 o'clock. I'm not gonna bother trying to reschedule it earlier or anything. I'll just keep it at 2.
Yeah.
And that sounded like that worked better for you anyway because you had the other thing like a half hour prior.
Hmm. Yeah, it actually
So
ended up just perfect, actually. Yeah.
wonderful. So quick rundown.
Hmm.
By the way, okay, not related to the rundown. I'll get to that in just a moment. But I have, you know how on the dock you've got the little black dot under the running apps, right?
Oh, yeah.
If you turn that on, it's the indicator to show that the app is active
It's
and
running.
running.
Yeah.
I have one of those dots on my MacBook screen on the dock. It looks like one of those dots. I rebooted and it's still there. I don't know what the heck.
But you're not running the app.
I'm not, but I mean it's floating in between the calendar and the notes app.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. And it does look like it. I hope it's not dead pixels.
I guess maybe maybe put up a full screen movie or something and see if it.
And see, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what it might be? I'm really embarrassed now. It might be schmutz on the screen.
Oh no. Like the fuzzy picture on Mac Voices the other day.
Yeah, it's yeah. Okay. It's perfectly round. I kid you not. It is the exact size of the dot under the icons. The
Huh.
exact size. And it's perfectly round. I it's not so it's not like it's obviously dirt, but now that I put my finger against it, it's
Uh-huh.
got texture. So I think it's all right. Let me see. Yeah, I just got
That
it
was
off.
it. It was like the other day I was watching something on TV that had insects or something on it. I can't remember what it was, but there was a fly in the house. Oh, there it is.
There it is. There's my
Yeah,
mystery dock
perfectly
dot.
round. Yeah.
All right. Oh, there was a fly in the house.
There was a fly in the house and it landed on the TV, but it was right when there was something on the TV where there was some show had insects or something on it, and the insect, when it changed scenes and that fly was still there. I'm like, what? It was perfect.
We have a very short throw projection TV.
Uh-huh.
It is an older Samsung projection, but it's not. It uses DLP chips. It's a DLP short throw projection, so it doesn't use the. It's not the projector with the color wheel and all that kind of stuff. It actually has
Right.
individual chips for the colors and everything, and it's LED
Mhm.
lit. Oh, there's Eric. There's Eric.
Here I am. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. Assign. Where are you now? Oh, there we go. Boom. Okay. There's Eric.
Here I
Hey,
am.
Eric.
Yes.
Eric, meet Brian.
Nice to meet you, Brian.
Hello. Likewise. How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you? Sorry I'm
Hey,
late.
doing?
Too much going on today.
Oh, no trouble at all. Hey, okay.
And it's really hot too. So this this is exciting though. Cord cutting is that has been one thing that has interested me for a long time, and just not really sure how to go about it. So this is totally cool.
Cool.
Brian,
Right on.
Brian is the expert, and he has 100% of the answers you will need.
Oh no.
Excellent. I am so happy about that.
Oh no. Set me up for failure.
No, I kid. All right.
It's one of those always moving target ones too. It's always
Yeah.
If he did have 100% of the answers, that would be the first time that's ever happened on this show.
Ever happened. Yeah. That would be a first. Yeah, actually.
18 years, and we finally got someone on who knows what they're talking about.
I was looking at some of the topics, that are in the agenda that were sent, and it made me think of different aspects of cord cutting though too. So I'm excited. I looked up a few of them. Then I got some local ones I can share too, which is kind of cool.
Excellent.
Cool.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right.
That's awesome.
I'm going to clear my throat real quick. I think it's allergies. It's been really bad for me lately.
Yeah.
Stuff. Yeah.
It's just, summer just always brings its own, especially down here in Texas. It's, and I don't generally have allergies, but something's been bugging me, and I have no idea what it is.
Okay, Eric, you did not get to take part in the title selection today. I came up with a title. And,
did you?
Well, you may see it in the interview chat. I don't know if it's there for you since you came in a little bit later, but I sent it over to Brian, and he's like, "Yeah, okay, that'll work."
Anything's good with me, because you usually come up with the best titles anyway, and I don't really have a clue.
Okay, so we'll get going. What I did want to do real quick, though, Brian, at the beginning is, introduce you, of course, but also get your thoughts about Macstock, if you're up for it.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
definitely.
Cool. And specifically, your perspective. I'll ask you all this, but your perspective as a first-time presenter versus having attended in the past just as an attendee. So
sure.
Yeah, we'll talk about that briefly, and then we'll get into the main conversation.
Sounds
okay. So here we go. Let's get started. We're at 24 minutes, and hey, a record, Eric. 24:15. Okay.
Oh.
But all that is your fault.
Like 38.
It's your fault. We would have started earlier. So you just think about that next time.
I will, and I'm sure I'll be late again.
You got really hollow all of a sudden. Did your mic change?
Yeah, I wonder what happened. You know what?
You sound like you're on AM radio.
That's my AM radio.
There you go.
There you go.
You're back.
Is it?
Nope.
Back?
No,
Okay,
you're gone
good.
again. You were back really good,
No,
and then you went away. Okay. All right. Quick test.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it sounds better.
All right.
Okay.
Do you have one of those auto-adjusting cameras too, like Brian does? Your picture keeps shifting.
Yeah, does it? Oh, yeah. You know what? I didn't think I had that on, but apparently I do. Yeah, I see Brian. Brian looks good shifting, though. I don't. I got to shut that off.
That's why
there's supposed to be something you can show your hand, and it shuts it off, but I don't think that actually does. I don't think I can. No, it's not working. Oh, well, look at that. Yeah, so.
Yeah. See?
Because you got us both beat.
Yeah. I got quick button press here so that
can bring up everything.
I can pretty much celebrate anything with a press of a button.
Yeah. That looks good too.
When I was talking about Ecamm at Macstock, what did I call it, Brian? I called it my everything's better button.
Yes.
Because when I press it, everything's better with lasers.
Everything's better with lasers. Yeah.
See?
No, I know that.
Yeah, that's That's why I called it my everything's better button.
I don't think my lasers are as good as yours. I think they kind of like ruin my chair, or my chair ruins them. One of the two.
I am amazed at what a great job Apple has done with this in terms of things like the confetti, how they have
Yeah,
it drop in front and behind.
and back. Yeah, and
Yeah.
balloons. I know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It is kind of amazing.
Just phenomenal job they did with that.
No, it really is.
Especially considering the environment. I mean, I could have anything here. Let's see what happens if I just put my hand here. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
They're wizards
I
at
know.
Apple. Absolute wizards.
They know how to. They know how to make it work.
So, and that's the other fun thing is when you start showing off lasers and confetti and stuff, the 3 people who are watching all drop off.
I know. I saw
Yeah.
that.
All right.
We're down to 0. So now, good. Now we can start.
Now we can start. All right, here we go. Now we're at 2727. I'm going to get started. All right. Switch back to me real quick. Okay. In 3, 2, 1. It's for Mac Guys Only, episode number 435 for July 19th, 2024. No, not the power cord. Hey everyone, welcome back to For Mac Guys Only, the show for the Mac community, where we share our thoughts and opinions on current Mac news and events. And joining me to discuss all things Mac is my For Mac Guys Only co-host, Eric Erickson. Hey Eric, how you doing?
Hey, Mike. I'm doing well.
Awesome. And with us for the first time, For Mac Guys Only guest, Brian Flanigan-Arthurs. Hey Brian.
Hey, how's it going?
Excellent. And remember, we do normally record for Mac Guys Only live on YouTube the second and fourth Friday of the month. And if you would like to come hang out, ask questions, and be part of our live studio audience, be sure to subscribe to the show at youtube.com/FMEOTV. And if you are joining us live, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat room too. So if you have any questions or comments as we move along, be sure to preface it with a Q, and we'll try to address it here on the show. So, folks may notice that our recording schedule is a bit off this month, and that's because of Macstock. Macstock 8 was held July 12th through the 14th, and we just wrapped up 3 fantastic days last weekend, including, for the first time ever at Macstock, an entire day of 90-minute workshops. And I'm excited to have Brian with us this time because not only, Brian, are you a first-time guest on For Mac Guys Only, but you were also a first-time Macstock presenter. But it wasn't your first time attending Macstock. How did this year compare to other years for you now that you were a speaker?
Sure. So there was definitely a little bit of nervousness, being a first-time presenter, but it was an amazing experience being able to get up and share some knowledge of what I learned and what I use and being able to help out. And I just know for the last several years, being able to be either an attendee, either virtually or in person, just learning so much. And so it was an awesome experience to be able to share some of the information that I knew for others.
And if I recall, the very first time you attended Macstock was actually a virtual Macstock. It was in 2021, right? 2021 was when you attended the first time. And that was when we had that really small studio audience. And now this time, we opened up ticket sales to everybody. And so we had a much larger group of folks in attendance, all eager to learn. That certainly from someone whose first time coming to Macstock, that was a completely different experience. Let's just put it that way. How did they compare for you?
Sure. And actually, I even started 1 year prior to that. I was at the 2020 virtual Macstock where there was no in-person option,
Right.
and so even then, even so much more different. This was the largest one I attended. I was fortunate to be able to go last year as well, and
Right.
also in the smaller venue, and the information is equally as awesome. Yeah, it's fantastic, and the personnel, the atmosphere itself is always great, no matter which venue it is. But being able to be in the larger space, having that extra day of information, of especially that first day of being able to get that 90-minute more in depth, hands on type experience workshops, it was a neat experience to partake in as well. So it's in other words, what was different than last time? It was equally great, but even better.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Um, and what about those talks? I mean, this year's presentations were just phenomenal, yours included. Was there anything that stood out at you this past weekend, either with the talks or just kind of Macstock in general?
Sure. I would say all the presentations were great. I've said for many years, every single presentation, whether it's something that you directly use in your professional life or personal life, or whether it isn't, maybe you don't necessarily use that software or do that type of, or utilize that piece of hardware or whatever it might be. There's so much to learn in just the aspects of how somebody goes about doing something, their mindset of how they approach a problem or a challenge. You learn equally almost as much in the content that they're delivering directly as the workflow that they're showing and utilizing as well. And then when you couple on top of that, the space, being able to, I was talking to the guy sitting next to me, and being able to bounce the ideas back and forth, like, oh, that's really neat. And the guy I was sitting next to a lot during the weekend is an IT guy, and
Mm.
I come in from the world of education, being a teacher, and just the different ways that we'd be able to pull some of that information, and then even the way that people were taking notes on things. He was using his iPad to take notes, and I was typing out some of the notes on the computer, and just I was learning, just from the other attendees too. So all of it is, it's neat, great experience.
She's given a talk on it in the past, and I can't remember what year it was, if it was 2018 or 2019. But Kirsten, one of our
Mhm.
presenters, Kirsten Sia, she likes to take sketch notes. So if you see her taking notes on presentations, you'll see her with her iPad in front of her and using her Apple Pencil to sketch out the ideas that are being presented with any given talk. And it's really amazing. And it was especially easy to understand when she gave her talk at Macstock how just a little drawing, a little sketch in the corner of this, the iPad screen can trigger all these memories about what the talk was about, what was important to her, and how she might be able to use the topics that were shared during that presentation. So yeah, there's yet another way to take notes during the weekend. And then you mentioned too, I think you mentioned automations just a moment ago. That's something too that I've heard from a number of folks is they'll say, I really got a lot out of the talks, but it wasn't because I necessarily used the software or the processes that were being presented to me. It was hearing how that person in particular used these processes or used that app on the Mac, and then thought about the tools that I have and how I can adapt them to do things similarly in my workflow.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
think there's a lot to be said for that, and I do the same thing when I attend workshops, whether they're virtual or whether they're in person. I don't necessarily use the software, but if it's a topic that I think is interesting or will be interesting to me, I'll still attend and try to adapt what I learn to the way I do things. Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the show, Brian, is because of your session at Macstock. I think it was about, well, possibly even sooner, but it was about halfway through your talk where I thought, we have got to get Brian on for Mac Guys Only to tell us about this stuff because it's a topic that we've never covered here before. Have we covered cord cutting before, Eric?
Yeah, I think very little in its probably usually in the vein of how do you do that? Like and one of the things I think you mentioned about it, one of the things that's always kind of stopped me was live sports and stuff like that. I'm like, oh yeah, I could do that. I could do this, but yeah, then it's not gonna. And if you don't, care about sports, that's not a big deal then. But but I'm sure there's other live things that could be an issue too outside of that. I don't know, but and I know things have changed a lot even in that arena. I haven't kept up with it, and it's such a big thing. There's so many different ways to come at it. It seems like to me that I never know where to start. It's just, yeah.
Well, Eric is a master of transitions, Brian, because the topic of your presentation at Macstock cord cutting, and in your case, cord cutting from a sports nut perspective, is one that more and more people are dealing with these days, as they wonder if now is the time to finally drop cable or satellite and stream everything instead. But there are still a few questions that leap up when we talk about cord cutting, and that's kind of what I'm hoping we can talk about a bit today. But first, what I would like to do is, you mentioned you're in education, that you are an educator. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your talk at Macstock, and then we can jump into it.
Sure. Yeah, just a little bit about myself. I've been an educator for the past 16 years and mostly teaching econ for most of that 16 years. Right now, I'm a teacher on special assignment, which is neat in its own way too. I have opportunity right now. I'm coaching new teachers, mentoring them into,
Oh, wow.
and which is a really neat and rewarding opportunity with the staff. And then on the student end, I am the person who provides orientation to our students. I work at a particular school where we have what they call revolving enrollment. And so we have students throughout the entire year always coming in and starting with us. And through that, onboarding them, making sure that they're comfortable with software that they're using, the procedures of the school, the layout, the familiarity, that type of thing. And then following up, having that continuous follow up between both the staff and the students, checking in, making sure that they're okay if they don't need any resources, connecting them when they do need resources, whether I know the answer or directing them to where they can find that answer. And then on top of that, providing some professional development for staff, and also helping out with some of the data. So pulling in some student data, whether that's formative or summative assessment data, and then utilizing that data to help drive that, like I said, that professional development or connecting with the teachers on what they might need. But really neat experience there. And then as a hobby, just for fun, I love sports. So looking at, going into the topic from Macstock, I really wanted to kind of demonstrate and share as a person who doesn't subscribe to cable or satellite. And and sometimes that even that definition of cord cutting is sometimes interesting because, well, we've had the traditional, coax cable that's come through for cable, and, we have internet as well. And now you kind of have that gray line, like products like YouTube TV or Sling TV. I don't personally subscribe to those either. So when I'm talking about cord cutting, I'm talking about not utilizing those products either. And so looking at, okay, well, what can you get? And I kind of focused on professional baseball, basketball, and football, and then kind of like the Power Four conferences for football and basketball for college sports, and saying, well, what can you get? You try to keep it optimistic. Don't focus on what you can't. Focus on what you can.
Right.
And
Right.
What can you watch? Yeah.
And then at night, Brian, when we were talking in the bar area after the day's talks had been over, I said, Brian, what about MLS? What about Premier League? What about the Women's League here in the States? The NWSL? What about, and I started throwing all these soccer references at you because there wasn't enough soccer in your talk, Brian.
Yeah.
No.
It
leads us to, there has to, maybe a part two.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, Apple TV Plus has got the MLS now, right? Something.
It does. It does. Yeah. They do a really good job of it too.
Yeah. And they almost were going to have Sunday Ticket, but no.
Yeah.
NFL turned them down. It's too bad.
And I think we'll get into that in just a moment. But while your talk was specifically focused on sports. Oh, by the way, just going back real quick here, Brian, you mentioned you were sitting next to someone in IT and you're in education. But as I'm listening to you describe what you do for a living, there's a fair amount of IT snuck in there as well.
I do live a lot in Excel. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to cord cuttings. Sports, we'll set sports aside for just a moment because there's a lot to talk about there. And Eric brought up some really good points with live sports. And then what about, the minor leagues and things like that folks might want to watch. But where does one start? I mean, if I'm currently subscribed to, say, Comcast or DirecTV or, Dish Network or whatever, and I want to look to cut that out of my monthly bill and switch to streaming instead, which is probably the better way to phrase this, right? We're not cutting a cord, we're switching to streaming. Where would I want to start?
Well, for me, I think of, am I using the service and what am I using the service of, So even when you're thinking of if you're subscribed to cable in the traditional sense and you're turning on and you're watching the 200 plus channels, what are you watching, And then from there are some that are offered on streaming services. Some are, I like to say, no monetary cost to you, and not have an out-of-pocket cost associated with them. So there are some streaming options like Pluto TV that has a lot of channels that you might find what you're watching on traditional cable might be offered on there. When you're looking at sports, you generally, not all the time, but generally speaking, are going to have to probably put money into one of the streaming, if not more than one of the streaming options, to substitute from that. So sometimes there are costs associated with that. And then when you're thinking about what you're watching or what you want to watch, I would also consider that there are some shows now that the only home of those shows are on streaming. So those are some of the considerations. There's, and then what can you get over the air? There might, if you have an antenna, to your TV, you might be able to pick up a ton of channels that might satisfy whatever it is that you're looking for as well. If you're looking for something in substitute of what you're paying for cable.
I know when we first looked at dropping DirecTV, because that's what we had, I wanted something reasonably equivalent because I did exactly what you talked about. I said, what are we watching? And at the time, we watched a lot of Food Network. We watched a lot of HGTV. We don't really watch local news so much. I get my news through other sources, so that wasn't a big concern. We don't really watch a lot of local events or local sporting competitions, things like that. So that wasn't a big concern. But in my mind, I was thinking, I need to try to recreate or reproduce what I'm getting with DirecTV. And how do I do that? And in our case, it was Hulu Live. They have the Hulu and then they have I think they just call it Hulu Live, right? And that's where you get not only the on-demand stuff, which at the time, Hulu was ABC, it was NBC, it was Fox. Who else? It did not have CBS content on it. But it had most of what we used to call the big four, right? Or when we were kids, the big three. You had CBS, NBC, and ABC. Wait, CBS, NBC, and ABC. Then later, as we grew up, we started to get Fox and things like that.
Yeah.
But it did not include things like WGN. It did not include things, to Chicago listeners, Channel 9. or it did not include things like PBS. So we looked at, okay, well, we like HGTV, we like Food Network, so Hulu Live seemed to be the best way to go, and that was even before. Well, it's Scripps Network. What's the name of the see? This is why we have an expert on, Brian. With the name of the service that streams HGTV and Food Network and all that, they have a paid service for that now. Discovery. Yeah,
Plus.
that didn't exist as a streaming network when we switched over. So again, Hulu Live is what we looked at to get those channels, and then that gives you DVR capability and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what our first reaction was to try to recreate what we had with satellite. And in retrospect, that was a mistake. We didn't need to do that because we really only needed to watch these few things, these few channels. And it turns out we were okay with not getting some of them. So eventually we did drop Hulu Live and switch to more a la carte type services. What was your experience like when you first looked at cutting cable or satellite?
You know, I went first without hardly any of the streaming options at all. I kind of relied more on like YouTube, to get a lot of information. There's a ton of videos and things of that nature. I looked a little bit at Pluto TV. Some of the things started to come about though as products that I already was subscribing to, like for instance, Prime Video, being an Amazon Prime customer, it's bundled as part of what you're paying for anyways.
Right.
And so started looking at some of that. Some of these options even started off with a free tier that then eventually had a cost associated with them.
Disappeared. Yeah.
Yeah. And so those were some of the things that came about. When I think about one of the nice things about a lot of the streaming options in comparison to sometimes cable or satellite is oftentimes you might be locked into a 1 or 2 year agreement where if you decide that's not for me, well, you're still paying for it for the remainder of that term, or at least have a hefty penalty fee to leave early. Whereas a lot of the streaming options, you enjoy it and you're like, well, I'm not getting that much out of it. You can disconnect it at the end of the month, and then you're no further out of pocket after that.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to say, I think some people go as far as to pick up a streaming service to watch a particular show, and then when that show, when they get done with it, they stop subscribing to it. Like Ted Lasso or something like that, and then they stop it altogether. So I kind of wonder how eventually streaming services will combat that if it gets even more. But you're right; it's just easy to cancel and easy to get out of, and it's nice that way.
I think there's two things come to mind when you're asking, like, well, what will streaming services do to combat that? Two things come to mind. One is some of them will try to offer you a better deal if you subscribe for an annual price. And so if you divide that annual price up into 12, you are saving money per month. But if you weren't going to have it every month, let's say you only wanted it for 6 months, it would still be cheaper not to do that in the first place.
Right.
The other, yeah. And then the other way I've been seeing more and more of is they're adding on, part of the service, some live sports or live events. And I think that tries to keep people going more throughout the whole year so that they don't disconnect. And I've also seen, I remember like when Netflix first came about, it almost seemed like, everything was dropped all at once. Like if there's a 10 episode season or something, all 10 episodes dropped and you can binge it.
Yes.
Now it's like everybody's just dropping it like 1 week at a time.
Yeah.
So I think that those are some sneaky ways that they kind of string you along to keep you going on it, I think.
No, that's exactly right. I much prefer the Netflix way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're the only ones that do that. I think they're the only ones that ever did it. The more you think about it, I think they're the only ones that still do it, actually.
That might be. I think sometimes Hulu drops shows all at once.
All at
I'm
once.
not sometimes, but you're right. Typically, they do a regular release schedule, whether it's 2 at first and then 1 every week thereafter. I know
Yeah.
Apple TV does that.
Yep.
I think where a lot of these streaming services really hook you, or where they've hooked us, and why I'm not dropping and resubscribing and dropping and resubscribing, is the level of quality in terms of the shows that are coming out now has risen dramatically over what we necessarily had with just network TV. And Apple TV is probably the premier example of that. I can't think of any Apple TV Plus show that I've tuned into because the topic interested me. Whether it's Silo or whether it's Trying or whether it's Ted Lasso or what have you, every single one of them has been a very high quality production, high quality writing, and the type of show that really hooks you in and makes you want to come back and watch more. And then when the season ends up being short, like Acapulco this season, when is the next season dropping? Apple,
Yeah.
come on. Let's not wait a year. Let's get it out now. I know that's not
Yeah.
realistic, but yeah. How about you, Eric? How did you end up? Did you kind of like jump straight into streaming, or did you dip your toes into it and then kind of slowly cut the cord?
No, we still actually have DirecTV here. I'm
Oh,
still
really?
trying to work it out. So yeah. And it's funny because DirecTV, you see ads where you can stream on there on
Mhm.
there, like get Discovery Plus or whatever, Paramount Plus. And I'm like, yeah, you want me to subscribe to you and stream these other services. I mean, it's like, that's kind of clever. I guess it probably, some people might get mixed up or whatever. And, because a lot of these streaming services now have so many shows that they're kind of popular in their own right. So, people want to be able to watch a certain show or whatever. But yeah, no, that's where I was kind of interested in this, because I haven't totally dropped it yet. So I'm definitely looking to, though.
Well, if we talk about, as I mentioned earlier, the top 3 or top 4 regular network television channels, the ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, and let's throw PBS in there too. It
Yeah,
was always
definitely.
pretty easy to switch to streaming and get ABC and NBC and Fox. CBS was always a tough nut to crack. And then PBS was tough too, because they would stream some content, but it was difficult to find a live stream of PBS. In other words, if you wanted to find your local PBS content, that was much harder. Now that's changed. I believe their streaming service now prompts for your zip code, and then they stream the content for your local zip code. So it's a little bit more like tuning into what is here, Channel 11, if you're going over the air or, satellite or cable. And ABC, of course, is Hulu. Fox is Hulu, thanks to the Disney-Fox merger. That made that a lot easier. But then NBC partitioned themselves out and created Peacock. So now if you want the NBC shows, you got to have Peacock. If you want the CBS shows, you've got to have Paramount Plus,
Paramount Plus,
or
yeah.
what was formerly CBS All Access. So it's almost as if these different services are, and I kind of do this when I explain it to somebody who maybe hasn't dipped their toes into cord cutting at all. I kind of explain Hulu and Paramount Plus and Peacock as channels. Think of them as channels. You're subscribing to this so that you can get those shows that you want to watch. And while most of them have, Peacock and Paramount Plus have a live streaming component to them, they're more on demand. So the event TV that we used to have, where everybody gathered around the TV to watch Cheers on Thursday night or what have you, or MASH on Mondays, or I'm really aging myself as I say that. But, we don't do that anymore. And I realized we don't really have those big mini-series events anymore like we used to as well.
No.
That was always a huge deal. Everybody watched the new miniseries that came out. And now if there is a miniseries, you're going to just find it on Hulu or Paramount Plus or Peacock or whatnot, and not everybody's going to see it. And so you don't have those same water cooler conversations that you used to have back in the day. But that does bring up, Brian, your specific angle on this, and that's live TV, specifically sports. And there's a big one coming up, and that's the Olympics.
Yeah, the Olympics. I was looking over, and Peacock seems to be the home of where you can find a lot of that Olympic coverage. There's a fair amount of NBC over the air, and some of their, I think like CNBC, some of their affiliates, to NBC, I think will run some of the programming as well. But yeah, when I was looking over this, I found a lot seemed to be on Peacock. Seems to kind of be directing everyone there. And if I recall, I want to say Peacock was originally debuted. They really pushed it right before summer of 20 when, for the Tokyo Olympics, which, of course, got bumped a year with the pandemic and everything.
Yeah.
But if I recall, that was like kind of like their launching thing was like, we're the home if you want to watch most of availability of Olympics. It was kind of, and maybe that's probably one of the reasons why I think Peacock kept a free tier for a while, because I don't think they had that programming to support that launch, perhaps.
I kind of found with the Olympics the last time they were on, they were very disjointed to me. I remember growing up and being able to just tune into, well, whether it was ABC or NBC, that's usually who aired it, and then some of the ancillary channels. You could tune into it and watch pretty much any sport that you wanted to, but now it's so splintered, as you mentioned, CNBC and some of the other subsidiary channels that NBC Universal owns. It's so splintered that if I find out that a particular sport I'm interested in is on CNBC, I just have absolutely no way to watch it. And
Right.
I think that's kind of the problem with the Olympics right now as well. A lot of it is on Peacock. It's not on there in a consistent or regular way unless you want to watch gymnastics, unless you want to watch track and field, unless you want to watch not all the games, but maybe, the finale of the baseball, Olympics baseball, or, weightlifting or something like that. But to be able to watch all of the Olympics has actually become much more difficult, I think, than it used to be.
Well, I was going to say, though, when I was a kid, I don't think you could watch you only watched the big stuff, too, on the network, right? I mean, I don't remember being able to see, like, archery and, all that stuff. I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's gotten worse. The one thing I do remember, though, with the last Summer Olympics in Tokyo, at least on DirecTV and with all those ancillary channels you were talking about, they had a big, DirecTV had some big thing with NBC, and it had everything listed, it came up in the receiver. So it had all these events listed, all these sports, and then you just basically said, I want to record this, I want to record it. And it's almost like you didn't really know what channel it was on. It just, it recorded it, and you're like, okay, now I'm watching kayaking or whatever, the canoeing. And that actually was really cool, because I remember thinking at the time, because again, I was like thinking that'd be nice to get rid of DirecTV. And then that came out, and I'm like, well, I guess I got to watch this,
Keep
and I actually had a
longer.
better time watching those sports that no one else watches, than some of the big ones. I mean, whether it was badminton or ping pong, it was just, it's fun watching at that level of play. It's just really neat. Even the archery I thought was really cool too. Well, I like archery anyway, but
yeah, archery is a lot of those that you mentioned are sports that I grew up watching, but only because of the Olympics. You don't tune
Yeah.
into them the rest of the year, but you do
Mhm.
tune
No.
into them, and you really get into it, and you start to know who the athletes are, and you start rooting for them, and you start, hoping for them to progress, and then, oh my gosh, they
Yeah.
get knocked out of the competition, and you're just crushed. And
I
yet
know.
you never knew who they were before the Olympics, and they
I
become
know.
household
You
names
don't
by the
remember.
time those 2 weeks are over or 3 weeks are
I know.
over. They're all household
Yeah.
names.
Yeah.
Well, and you
Especially
brought
if
up,
they win. Yeah.
I would say the point you brought up too with being able to DVR that particular event, it's so important sometimes during the Olympics when just the time shift around the globe of where
Yes.
they're taking place, and while we might be available and able to watch maybe in the evening, well, that's not evening wherever the Olympics is
There.
taking place or when that event's
Right.
happening, and yeah,
Yeah.
Notice that this year I scheduled Macstock around the Olympics.
Oh, you did.
Well, not
That's
on
right.
purpose. No, not on purpose.
Yeah.
But it's been a problem in past years because I want to watch the Olympics, but I'm so I'm so involved with planning Macstock that I
Macstock.
don't get the opportunity to watch them, which does bring up some of my favorite parts of the Olympics are the opening and closing ceremonies. I absolutely love those, and I always find that they're a little more difficult to watch on streaming services, especially if you subscribe to Peacock. You can watch it, but you can't watch it later. You have to subscribe to some sort of service where you can DVR it. So I'll talk about what I
Right.
now do for that in just a little bit, because I do have a solution that's been working really, really well for me for that. And I guess we can go ahead and talk about that because there are other milestone or special event type programming like holiday parades or local events, or as I jokingly put in my notes, Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve. You can watch that sometimes on Hulu. They have put that on Hulu in the past so you could watch it on demand after it was over. But part of the fun of something like Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve is to sit there and watch the ball drop, right? So
Right. Right.
that's not quite as fun watching it on demand as it is watching it live. So how do you do that, Brian?
that's a tough one. ABC, like you said, you'll get a lot of their programming on Hulu. You'll be able to watch it, but it's not on demand, or it's rather it's on demand. It's not in the moment, so it's one of those tougher ones. I was looking at the standalone ABC app. They have one besides the Hulu app, but pretty much everything's locked down unless you log in with a cable or satellite provider. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, that's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, yeah, they do seem to tie the ability to watch something live with those standalone apps to your subscription to cable or satellite, and that completely defeats the
Yeah.
purpose of what we're talking about here today.
Right. Trying to
Well,
do.
Well,
Yeah.
I do
yeah,
have a solution for that. That works pretty well without needing to subscribe to something like YouTube TV, which would be an option. You could do that, or Hulu Live, which would be an option, or Sling. What is the name of the service, Brian, that Sling offers? Is it just Sling, like Sling Orange and Blue, something like that?
yeah, it's actually kind of interesting, and it can help you depending on what channels you're actually looking for, and you can save some money compared to others. When I last looked it up, they had the combination of Sling, like basically all the channels, which included, from a sports-minded perspective, the different varieties of ESPN and the different varieties of Fox Sports, etc. And that was $55 a month, I believe. But you could subscribe to just orange or just blue, which is the one, I can't remember which was which, but one of them only offered um, the ESPN variety of channels, and the other one only
Mm,
offered the Fox variety of channels. And I think that price was $40 a month. And so if you knew nothing you wanted to watch was on Fox or FS1 and that type of thing, they'll then subscribe to the one that has the ESPN package or vice versa. And so that could be a solution. Off the top of my head, I don't recall if some of the streaming services, with the cable variety of these streaming services, some offer local channels and some do not. And so off the top of my head, I can't recall if Sling is one that does or not.
And it's usually an add-on, if I believe. You can get the local channels, but you got to pay just a little bit extra than if you went with the regular streaming.
Yeah, some of them do offer that a la carte. Yeah.
I never understood what you just described, and that is every time I looked at Sling, I would see exactly that. Oh, if you want the ESPN channels, the Disney-owned ESPN channels, you get this level. If you want the Fox sports channels, the FS1, FS2, etc., which is where I found a lot of MLS was on those, well then, ooh, you got to get this package. You want it all? Well, here you go. Here's the combo that is way more expensive, but you get everything. And now I'm paying the same price as I paid with DirecTV, you know? So
Right.
the one thing that Disney did not pick up is Fox Sports, if I understand correctly. They picked up the Fox production studios. They picked up, you know, the television shows and things like that, the movies, Fox Studios, 20th Century Fox, effectively, is what they purchased. But they did not purchase Fox Sports. So that's perhaps why they remain separate. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's my understanding. And then the sports that are on, Fox proper, as a local channel, it depends. Like you could, of course, all these solutions could be just done over like with an antenna. You can get these varieties. Some people don't have that antenna capability though, or it's really hard
Right.
to get that signal. Where I live, I'm in a particular area where there's a great website, antennaweb.org, and you jot in your zip code, and it'll tell you if you want to watch these channels, here's the type of antenna that you need in order to get those channels. And
that's nice.
for my zip code, it's just really hard to get any channels unless you get a giant powered antenna and put it into your home. And yeah,
And
not going to
even
happen too
then,
readily.
even then, you can't, through the antenna, get things like ESPN and FS1 and FS2. You can't get those. You can get other local channels, which, by the way, there are some really cool sports channels over the air, especially here in the Chicago area, which we just stumbled across, and we're like, wow, this is awesome. There's an entire Doctor Who channel just coming over the air. It's amazing what's there over the antenna. And I do want to talk about that in just a second, and talk about the janky solution that I have for getting over the air stuff. But let's go back to your talk at Macstock, because your talk was specifically focused on sports. Now, I do want to give you a brief shout out before we talk about sports and where to find them. I want to give you a brief shout out because you did something really, really cool with your slides. And I don't know if I will be able to describe this in a way to do it justice, but in the top right corner of each of your slides, you indicated what platform the various services were available on. So iOS, Mac, what else did you have? Safari, things like that up there.
iPad. Yep.
iPad,
Apple TV. Yeah.
Apple TV. But what you did, and I'll let you give the credit where credit is due, because you told me how this came about. But what you did is you color-coded those icons in the top right to the service that you were talking about. Such a subtle thing to do, but it lent so much to those slides, I'll have to say, because it instantly allowed you to recognize, oh, that's Peacock, that's Paramount Plus, that's Netflix, because you color-coded those icons in the top right. This is such a great idea.
Well, I may have on the technical end done that, and I got to learn how to use the eyedropper and do that, which is kind of just a tool I was able to learn how to use. But the credit on that goes to my wife. I was having a couple set of eyes on the presentation and run through and say, hey, any last minute changes you recommend and that type of thing. And she says, that's kind of bland. I think I had a black background, so I think I had all white lettering on those originally. And she's like, it'd be kind of neat if they kind of match the same color. I'm like, I'm gonna learn how to do that. Okay, it's because I originally just saw the palette of maybe like 16 colors or something, and then she's like, "Yeah, but that's not the right kind of blue." And I'm like, "Well, let me learn. Let me figure this out. I can figure this out." And yeah,
Such
it
a
turned. Thank you. I appreciate
fantastic
it.
idea. Fantastic
Thank
idea.
you.
I'd really love. In fact, it was after you sent me the slides. I think I sent you an email almost right away complimenting you on that because it just stood out and it struck me right
Thank
away.
you.
The way you presented it was great. Keyed everything, tied everything together. It was
Thank you.
a
And I'll
very,
pass
very
on
good job.
my wife.
Yeah. But let's talk about that sports. So things like that was Eric's point earlier is giving up DirecTV. What does he have to do to tune in things like MLB and NFL and NBA and yes, the MLS and things like that. And heck, throw in things like the Premier League and UEFA Champions League and Bundesliga and La Liga. How can we, and I don't need you to answer every single one of those, but how can we get the sports that we want to watch when we cut the cord and no longer have DirecTV or Comcast or what have you?
Sure. I think first it helps to know, do you follow more the league or do you follow more of the team? And if you follow
Mm,
the league, sometimes the answer is going to give you different, depending on how you answer that question, will determine,
Mm,
I think, on what services might be available. There's been a great movement over the past couple years of individual teams, excluding the NFL, in basketball and baseball in particular, where you follow a particular team, you can choose that team a la carte and pay a lower subscription price. That if you're in a position where sometimes the channel might only be available on cable or satellite providers otherwise, or in the case of some basketball teams, they do offer over the air broadcasting, which is great. But if you're in an area that doesn't get a stream over the air with an antenna, you can still order that individual team a la carte. Um,
well, that's
Depending
nice.
if, yeah, so we're seeing that a lot in baseball and basketball. Um, and then if you are a fan of the local team, it
good
kind of
luck.
determines what's available. So if you're in football and you're a fan of the local team and what they call your local market, and you're generally that's probably the game that's going to air on, Fox, CBS. If it's that local team that's on, and especially CBS because of Paramount Plus, um, you should have no problem getting most of your games available without cable or satellite.
Mm,
Fox is kind of your tough one if you're a local fan of your local football team, and the games that air on Fox, because Fox doesn't have um, a straightforward way to watch Fox without logging into a cable or satellite provider. So that's a
Right.
yeah,
little
that's
tougher.
true.
But there's actually a really you brought up like the different streaming option or what services they were on. NFL Plus is its own service, and it's actually kind of a neat service that sometimes people bag on because it's like, why are you paying for this? It's what you get over the air for, whatever's showing for your morning and afternoon games, and then your evening games with they're traditionally on NBC for Sunday night football, your Monday night football, and your Thursday night on Amazon Prime. But what NFL Plus does is, as long as you're comfortable seeing it on a smaller screen, namely your tablets or on your phone, you can basically get that game and watch it. And I think I want to say it's $7 a month if I'm not mistaken. They have two tiers, but $7 a month will get you that option.
Mm,
So you can, without subscribing to ESPN, because right now there's currently no way to subscribe to ESPN proper, without having cable or satellite. That does seem there might be some changes in the horizon actually really soon, with a particular streaming service called Venue Sports. It was announced back in February, and it itself is going through some litigation. So we'll see if it pans out. But it might be an option where you can get. It's a partnership with Disney, Warner Discovery, and I believe it would be, and I guess Fox for the sports varieties of Fox. and they haven't announced the price. They announced that they said it in the fall, so we don't know when in the fall, but presumably the start of either the NFL or NBA seasons. But like I said, there's a lawsuit that Fubo jumped on, and Fubo is one of the
Fubo's
similar to
sports streaming network. Yeah.
exactly. And so if it gets tied up in court, I don't know. We'll see if it ever comes out, or if it comes out and it's way too expensive, where you're like, well, I just might as well get YouTube TV or something. Who knows? But there might be an option for cord cutting in the near future there too.
You mentioned YouTube TV, and I was just thinking I should probably tack on there. You said getting sports, local sports without cable or satellite, but you can also, I'm sorry, you mentioned ESPN, not being able to get ESPN without cable or satellite, but I believe you do get it, ESPN and ESPN2 with Hulu Live and YouTube TV.
YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
the streaming varieties of cable and satellite. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Still get them. Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't have to have cable or satellite to get ESPN, but you do need to subscribe to one of those cable/satellite equivalent streaming services,
Right.
and then you're paying the same amount then anyway.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Although it seems like YouTube TV was cheaper than comparable direct TV or kind of some of the satellite or some of the cable services, but still, yeah, you end up still paying. It seems like it kind of comes down to what people have always wanted was they've never wanted to have a service with 200 channels and 180 of them that they don't want. They just kind of wanted to have their stuff a la carte. And the services always said, we can't do that. We just can't. And it makes sense too why they probably can't. But in a way, that's kind of why I think streaming's picking up, just because people are like, I don't watch all this stuff. I don't need to have it. And, plus I think people, like you said too before, time shifting and whatever, like to be able to watch it on demand or, different times. But it's, yeah, I mean, that's the big appeal for me is just not having to, I guess, maybe pay for more than what I actually want or need.
Yeah, exactly. Local sports are always tough. I have the hardest time. Even when I paid MLS for a subscription to the MLS service, I could never watch Chicago Fire games. They were always blocked out in favor of the agreements that they had with Comcast, Xfinity, or whatever they're called these days. The only service that I've been able to consistently watch Fire games without any hoops or anything is Apple TV Plus. The MLS games on Apple TV Plus happily show the local games, so we know it can be done. It's just, I think Apple just said, look, if we're going to do this, this is how we're going to do it. Too bad. And they probably wanted that arrangement badly enough that they said, okay. And then that goes back to what you said earlier about NFL not moving forward with it. Apple probably said, we want to show the local games. I'm just guessing. I have no idea, no insider information, nothing. I'm just guessing that Apple said, we want to show these local games, and NFL said, no, we have these other arrangements. Well, we can't allow that.
And part of it too, I think, was they wanted to keep it part of the Apple TV Plus subscription, I think, and not have it as an add-on thing. And
not an add-on.
I don't know. The NFL didn't want to do that either. I think they were thinking that it,
I heard about that.
I don't know, cheapened it. Yeah.
Which now MLS is an add-on. You do have to pay extra for it if you want it.
Right.
I got it free from T-Mobile last year. The offer was not extended for this year. I opted, because of stuff going on and not being able to sit there and watch the number of games I would want to watch, I did not opt to pay for it this year. But having it given to me by T-Mobile, that was great, because while I'm working at the computer, I could just fire up a game and throw it in the corner of the screen and be absolutely fine even if I missed 15 minutes of the game because I was focused on something I was working on.
Right.
Speaking of which, MLS, yes, you can find on Apple TV Plus. UEFA Champions League is typically on Paramount Plus, and Premier League is on Peacock for anyone who wants the soccer news. Now, Brian, what's the best way to get MLB and NBA and NFL and what have you? It sounds like you're saying that their individual services may be best, but is that the case? Or do we want to do it as an add-on to something else?
Well, like you mentioned Apple TV before, Major League Baseball airs 2 Friday night baseball games. So
That's right.
you're in,
Yeah.
in about 2 hours from now, there's going to be 2 games that'll be airing, and it's the exclusive home of those 2 games. So if you don't have Apple TV Plus and you want to watch your team play, that's the only place to watch it. So you better subscribe if that's what you wanted to watch. There's also Roku, the Roku company, starting, I think it was this year, it might have been last year, but every Sunday morning they have an exclusive game. You don't have to log in to their, to their service or anything. You just go to their website, and you can stream a game, an exclusive baseball game there. Another place you can go, ESPN Plus is a streaming option. It's part of that Disney bundle, but it's also a la carte. And ESPN Plus is, they offer 1 baseball game a day. And so what they're kind of doing, I don't know if the right term is like simulcasting it. They're basically whatever is their daily game, that game, it's being called by their announcing crew. They're just putting their little ESPN logo on, next to or beside the NBC logo or the Bally Sports logo or whomever it is for that particular game.
Interesting.
So you can get one, and now the blackout rule applies on that one though. So when my local team is playing in the ESPN, as that is the free game, I'm not able to watch it. So that's one of the negatives there. Basketball is kind of interesting. You can, if you're a subscriber to Max, so enjoying HBO programming, they have an add-on that I believe last time I checked, I think it's still just, no additional cost at the moment. But I think it'll cost an extra $10 a month, called the Bleacher Report add-on, and that gives you access to the TNT basketball games. So they air, a couple games a week that are the exclusive home of those games. So that's a way you can get some basketball games, and they're usually your bigger marquee games. So they tend to put those games on there. Let me think. Like you said, you can always go to that particular league's website, and you can get the NBA League Pass, for example, which is basically everything besides your local team or those nationally broadcast teams.
That ticked me off so much. So
stupid
MLB, I could never watch a Cubs game, even though I had the subscription to it. And then T-Mobile gave it to me again this year. I'm like, well, I don't care. I don't care. If I can't watch the teams that I want to watch, what's the point?
Exactly.
I know. That was the thing too. I can actually watch. My team's the Brewers, so I can actually watch them living here or even living in California. So it actually kind of paid. Exactly. But I know you could listen to the audio, and the MLB app is an awesome app. But it's like, what the heck?
If I can't watch the games I want to watch, then certainly why would I ever pay for this service? That T-Mobile gives it to me free, cool. But I have to admit, I have not tuned into the app once this season, because last season just put this foul image of it in my mind that every single time, it didn't matter who the team was, every single time I wanted to watch a game, they're like, no, you can just listen to the audio. I'm like,
I do say, Eric brought up a good point with the audio. Sometimes if you want to go for a walk or you're going grocery shopping or, it is kind of nice to be able to have that. And oftentimes it's either the home or the away broadcasting team, so you
which
get
is
to
nice too.
choose. Yeah. Yeah. So if your team's losing and you're like, I want to be amongst friends,
I do admit, I do like listening to the away broadcast teams. I enjoy that a lot. Yeah, I think that's fun because you get those local ads and stuff, right? They include this in there if I'm remembering right. Yeah, you get the stuff that you don't normally hear around here. So it's kind of like when someone sends you something in the mail and they wrapped it in their local newspaper. What
Right.
do? I open it up and I read that paper. Don't you?
Paper.
Maybe I'm just weird, but that's what I do. I'll
No.
open up that newspaper and I'll sit there and read the local stories and all that stuff. And it's like, this is kind of cool because this is like a whole nother part of the country that I have never visited, may never visit. And yet
See?
here I am reading their local news.
Their
Yeah.
local news. Yeah.
Kind of the same thing.
The other thing is you could, watch the game and, stream the game on MLB, let's say on Apple TV, and then listen to the Homer broadcast audio or vice versa, which was pretty slick too. And now I think though you could always watch the away games though, right? So even if you couldn't get the Cubs at home, you should have been able to watch them away. Is that
In general, if it was a Cubs game, I could not tune it in. It was almost always invariably blocked out.
blocked? Yeah, it's just so ridiculous.
And maybe I was just catching the wrong games. But where I can watch Cubs games is on Apple TV Plus for free. So I figure, well, it's not for free. I mean, I'm paying for Apple TV Plus, but
Right.
I'm only paying $10 a month. I'm not paying whatever it is per year for the MLB app. So
Yeah.
if I can occasionally watch a game on Apple TV Plus, I'm happy as a clam. I don't need to pay whatever it costs for MLB. So
Well, and here we are talking about all these different, figuring out ways that we can kind of enjoy the games that we want to watch. It's almost no surprise that some people do turn down the dark path of, the stuff that's not on the up and up, that's
Right.
And it's almost like what Apple did, with the Napster days when iTunes came about, and like, okay, here's a one-stop shop of a reasonably priced item that you can purchase, and you can feel like you're helping the musician, the artist, and be able to do it in the right way, type thing too. So maybe there will be something that comes down the pike and say, here's something that helps everybody. I don't know. Maybe I'm too hopeful.
and maybe it's that new service you're talking about. What was it called? Venue?
Yeah. They call it Venue Sports. And so I think it was actually, and from what I read is the CEO is actually a former Apple executive from the Apple TV Plus team that brought some of I think they're instrumental in helping to bring MLS and Major League Baseball to Apple TV. So they seem to have a decent resume. So hopefully, if it passes all the courts and it comes through, it would be interesting to see, especially just to see what, as another option, at least, and see what that cost is.
And as Fubo is wrapped up in that whole to-do with this new service, it's probably worth mentioning, and we did mention this a little while ago, Fubo started as a sports-centric streaming service. So if you're mostly interested in sports, that's probably one of the first ones to look at. And without delving down, I'll just use your words here, Brian, without delving down the dark path but I'm not going to talk about piracy, without delving down the dark path of where do I watch rugby? Where do I watch track and field? Where do I watch archery? Where do I watch the NWSL? Without going down that path, I think, if I'm understanding correctly, and this is kind of the way I approached it too, you think about what sports are important to me, what sports do I want to watch the most, what sports am I okay with missing from time to time, and then narrowing down the services that offer those to you. And as you rightly pointed out, there are a ton out there that offer them to you for free or at very little cost. But the Roku channel has, well, not Roku channel itself, but Roku has sports on it. Plex is a streaming service that has some sports on it. So there are free services out there that I don't even think you need to create an account for them. I think you can just tune into the service and start watching these things. It's not on demand. It's a little bit more like traditional television in that you need to know when this is airing. There is no DVRing. There is no ability to watch it again later. But if you know what it is you want to watch, then research that before you do that final cord cut and just and say, okay, well, that's it. I'm done with Spectrum. I'm done with Comcast. I'm done with DirecTV or Dish or what have you. Just make sure that what you want to watch is going to be available in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
So you mentioned a couple times antenna. That is one of my backup solutions. So years and years and years ago, and this is where I have to laugh a little bit, I have a really janky antenna set up. I don't have an antenna on the house. We're close enough. We're about an hour-ish outside of Chicago. So we're close enough that you can pretty much put a coat hanger in your attic and get Chicago stations, right? I mean, you don't have to do a whole heck of a lot. So I ran down to the Ace Hardware and I picked up a pretty decent antenna with the idea that I was just going to put it in our attic. Now, antenna technology has come a long way since I did that. That was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. But I just bought this antenna. And then when I got home, I realized that you have to unfold all these arms to get the best signal reception. And I'm trying to do this in the attic with all the rafters and joists up there and all that. And it's really a weird setup because it's kind of balanced in between the joists of our attic. But it works enough for our purposes, for tuning in, the major networks in the Chicago area. It worked fine for that. And that was what we did at first, or I think we did in conjunction with DirecTV very early on. Then as we got more into DirecTV and they had the local channels, and then we did the Hulu Live and all that, I didn't rely upon the antenna that much. Then we dropped Hulu Live. And I said, well, gosh, what am I going to do now? How am I going to watch some of these things that I want to watch but aren't streaming? And there's just no way to stream them. And I decided to revive this whole idea of getting the antenna in our attic to work. And after a little bit of research, and I had a license to this for a long time, I decided that Plex and a Plex Pro subscription was really going to be the best option for doing that. And I think they call it Plex Pro. The reason for that is because that allows you to connect to an antenna and actually pull down the guide of what's airing locally and DVR what's airing locally. So in order to get that signal into Plex, I purchased a device called an HD Home Run. And specifically, I purchased the HD Home Run Flex Duo, which included two ATSC tuners in it. So I could actually connect two antennas to it. And each one of the tuners in it can tune in to two different channels simultaneously. So I really just have the one cable coming down from our antenna, but I can record two shows simultaneously, which is great. And that box is no bigger than maybe 4 or 5 inches square, and it's about an inch high. And it connects to the network with an Ethernet cable, and that's how Plex picks up the signal. It identifies the HD Home Run on the local network. All those channels get populated within the Plex administrative interface, and then through the Plex end user interface, which can be on the Roku, it can be on the Apple TV. Yeah, it can be on the Apple TV, or it can be on your iPad. And so for milestone events or things that otherwise are not streaming, like, for example, let's say the Thanksgiving parade, that's not something you're going to find streaming on Paramount Plus later necessarily, or on Peacock or whatnot. I'll record it, and with Plex running on a desktop Mac here I have in the house, and it can run on a lot of different platforms, but it's running on a desktop Mac here in the house, it just records straight to the hard drive, and then I can stream that recording back anytime I want to. So for someone who's interested in some of that type of programming, the things that you just will never find on streaming services, this is an awesome solution. And
Mm.
the most incredible thing about it to me was that when I hooked up that HD home run, and I've never been able to pull in very many channels at all. I didn't expect much when I hooked up that HD home run. I must have something like 80 channels that are coming because they're all digitally broadcast now. So we're not
Yeah,
just
it's a lot
dependent
better.
upon analog broadcast.
Analog.
It's all digital. So what used to be channel 2 is now channel 2.1, 2.2,
2.1.
2.3, and you've got all these different channels. It's amazing what's out there now just being broadcast for free over the air. And so that website you mentioned earlier, AntennaWeb, is probably a really good resource for someone who wants to set up an antenna, connect it to something like an HD home run, and there are other solutions, but HD home run is just I mean, it was almost literally plug and play, and then pairing it with Plex or one of the other competing software options like Plex. It's just been a perfect solution for me for that sort of thing.
That's awesome.
But you do need to have that signal, right?
You do need to
you have
have a signal,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
And that's the big bummer about it. Now, what I did find out, and this is a streaming service, and you mentioned it very, very early on, Brian, that's YouTube. It's really surprising how many local milestone type events are broadcast on YouTube. So something like the Rose Bowl parade every January 1st, you will find KTLA out of Los Angeles live streaming the Rose Bowl parade, and then
Oh yeah.
they keep
Yeah.
it on their channel for watching again later. That's awesome. Nobody else does that. You don't find that kind of thing with the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. There's too many commercial arrangements there, but you don't find that sort of thing with that or Chicago parades or stuff like that. So to have KTLA do something like that is a great way to catch, no matter where you are in the country or the world, to catch the Rose Bowl parade every January 1st. So plus you get those local commercials. So that's really cool too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And while we're talking about antennas, I don't know if you want to share this, Brian, but you mentioned that you have quite a bit of difficulty using an antenna at your home.
Yeah, that's one of the difficult things is being able to get that signal. If you don't have that signal coming in, you if I wanted to and was allowed to install a giant antenna, that might be an option. Over the years, there's been some companies that have come and gone that have had apps or websites that you could log into and get your over-the-air channels.
Yeah, they don't
And
last.
they don't last. They get sued by, I think I don't know if it's the networks or the affiliates, and they go away. But you would think in the modern age that would be, hopefully a solution because you're not getting the commercials. It's just literally just whatever's broadcasting.
Right.
But
You think
yeah.
they'd be okay with that? That, the commercial is still being shown to the eyeballs of
Right.
those watching, but because it's not being watched through their service, yeah,
that just doesn't come through. But
just doesn't come through.
maybe, who knows? Yeah, maybe in the future. But like you said, a lot of right there on YouTube, there are a fair amount of the local affiliates that actually do broadcast the non-network shows. So the late evening news might be on there.
Yep.
Some of the news hour type things from PBS, some of those types of things do end up finding their way onto their YouTube channels, which is nice.
Yeah, lots of PBS shows that my dad tells me about. He and his wife watch a lot of PBS, and he'll tell me about a show. And invariably, the very first thing I do is fire up YouTube and see if it's on the PBS YouTube channels. And more often than not, it is. And all the episodes are there, which is just fantastic. So they do a really good job about that themselves.
Yeah.
So we talked about how to watch different sports networks. We talked about how to watch different network TV shows, the services we might need to watch those shows. if I want to consider cutting the cord, and I think it's probably a good idea to say, hey, run them simultaneously. Make sure that if you are thinking about cutting the cord, that you kind of dip your toes into these waters first and see if you can watch everything that you want to watch by relying solely on streaming services while keeping your cable or satellite as a backup. I think that's probably pretty good advice, at least for what, a month overlap or 2 months overlap, something like that.
I would think so. Yeah. And yeah.
But if I want to dip my toes into streaming, what do I need? Do I need hardware?
Sure.
Do I need software? What about bandwidth requirements? It depends upon the internet. So what do I need to get started streaming?
Well, the good news is a lot of the major streaming networks or services rather, they offer their own apps on a variety of hardware. So if you're looking at your phone, if you're running on iOS or Android, whether you're an iPad, a lot of these will run through on your computer just through a browser. Some of them have standalone apps that you can download on your computer. Apple TV, Roku boxes, any of the streaming sticks, those types of things, generally will have that option for you. Different negotiations will not permit some of the streaming options to be in everywhere. Like I mentioned the NFL Plus earlier, and they don't have an Apple TV app. You also can't watch it in a browser. It has to be on your phone or your tablet for the NFL Plus offerings. So those types of things, there are some restrictions, but most hardware, most boxes or your phone or your tablets, software wise, a lot of them don't have, very difficult requirements. You can have I watch them on devices that are, 5, 6, 7 years old. It's fine. You're going to be okay. And then with regards to the bandwidth, some of them will have options that you can lower the quality of the video. So if you are maybe whether you have a data cap or maybe your speed isn't that fast for your internet, depending on what you're watching on YouTube, for example, if you're talking YouTube, you can lower that down to 144 or 480, or, depending on what it is. You may not need that higher quality if you're watching something that's you just have it on the background type thing. Maybe you don't need to use that much bandwidth for it. But all the way up, you of course, the HD options, and you think about what it is that you're watching, how long you're watching it. I think for me in my household, I'm thinking more like that data cap that I end up with right before the end of the month, and it's just like, okay, just let's lower the resolution and the quality a little bit,
Right.
for the next couple of days. Yeah, it will be okay. But yeah, so as far as their stringency, it's probably not too bad.
I have watched, we've had Hulu pretty much regularly for many, many years, even when we had DirecTV. We were not one of the early Netflix. We were an early Netflix DVD by mail subscriber, but not a Netflix streaming subscriber. But we've had Hulu for a very long time. Even when our internet connectivity was quite bad by today's standards. I mean, even a bandwidth of 5 megabits per second or something like that, you're still going to be able to stream a pretty decent resolution service, whether it's 720 or 540. Some of it depends too upon how you're watching it. If you're watching a somewhat low resolution stream, but you're watching it on your phone, you're probably not going to notice that much of a difference. Or if you're watching it on an iPad or what have you. Or as I watch most of the streaming most of the streaming that I watch is on a television that has really good upscaling. Now it only upscales to 1080, but the TV has this built in. It's not additional hardware. It's not coming through our Blu-ray player or the streaming box or whatever. It's the upscaling built into the TV. So especially something like a 540 even, which is DVD resolution, or a 480, which is old standard television definition, or a 720, those all upscale pretty nicely to 1080 on this particular television. And if you have a 4K TV, well, the upscaling on those is just phenomenal because so much content is not yet 4K, especially streaming content. And for that sort of thing, you really do need a pretty decent bandwidth for 4K stuff. So you kind of touched on this a little bit. We're just about to wrap up this conversation on cord cutting, at least for now. Maybe we'll have you back on to give us some updates in the near future, Brian. But there's something that has kind of bugged me a little bit, and you touched on this briefly a moment ago when you talked about the NFL and how when you subscribe to their $7 a month service, you have to watch it on your phone or your iPad. It sounds like you can't AirPlay it. That it has to be on that device. And that kind of thing just drives me bonkers. And the other thing that is really kind of crazy, because whether, if I AirPlay that content, it's still just me watching it. So what? I might show it to a room of 5 people, and those 5 people don't have their $7 a month subscription. Is that the deal? Is that what their freakout's about? I don't know. But the other thing that kind of gets me is services like Netflix and now Disney Plus also freaking out if you don't stream from your home, even if you're doing the streaming while on a trip. Now, I understand the reasoning for it, but I made the mistake, and I'm putting that in air quotes, of bringing a spare Roku with us on vacation last fall. And I connected that Roku up in the hotel where we were staying on the road, and we watched Netflix. Got home, and Netflix completely freaked out, thinking that I was family sharing, and I had to go through all these hoops and all these, steps to prove that I was who I said I was, just to watch an episode of Lucifer on our TV at home again. It was crazy. And it was one night we were on the road watching something. And you think that their algorithms would be smart enough to say, oh, okay, this is actually a Roku box that Mike has used in the past, and he's using it again. Yes, he's on the road, but because it was a Roku and not an iPad or an iPhone, they had a fit. Where do you see that going?
I think it's probably going to get worse, unfortunately. Just because that technology exists. And like you pointed out, it's like you would think too, by location-aware information that's being given out, they could obviously see, okay, so you're in a different location and you're not in your other location, but you're not streaming at that other location right now. So you're obviously, who cares where you're at? It shouldn't matter, because you're not in 2 places at once. I can understand maybe if you were, broadcasting or utilizing the service in 2 places at once, and it's like, well, maybe you shared your password or something, that type of thing. But you didn't, so that's awful. You would think a little bit of common sense comes through there.
It's almost as if they're relying too heavily upon geolocation. Eric knows this, and you might know this too as an educator, but Adobe has long had a policy in place, and we can have a whole hour-long discussion about Adobe and their licensing and all that by itself. But they've long had a policy in place where when you have a license to their Creative Suite or any standalone app, you can use it on the one Mac you have the license for, but then there was a portability clause. So you could load it onto a portable device as well. Now, sometimes that portable device was a second desktop computer, and that didn't really matter to them. What mattered to them was that you were limited to 2 devices for any one license. And it seems as if perhaps rather than depending upon geolocation, which, look, we have T-Mobile home internet here. Sometimes when I'm connected and I'm doing a lookup on a website and it geolocates me, it says I'm in Los Angeles. Well, that's because it's a cellular network. And sometimes it shows that we're from another location. So maybe instead of depending upon geolocation, they should just depend upon the number of streams that are happening. If it's a single family household, allow 1 stream. If it's a 4 family household or 4-member household, allow 4 streams. But to limit it by location, I think that's really I feel that's what's causing the most frustration for people.
Yeah, I
think that's
don't.
when.
I
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say that's one of the things with Apple. I think does a good job on Apple family sharing, where you can share your, your Apple TV with 6 members of your. I think it's 5 or 6 members of your household. And
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
don't go through a bunch of questions or ask too many things. Just who are your 6, and that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
What
No,
were you going to say,
I don't
Eric?
know why they care about location. To be honest with you, like you said, I think they would care more about how many streams are being pulled down than, and I think they do. I don't know. Is it a VPN thing? They don't want people, I don't know, watching something if they're not actually in that country. It just seems really odd. And I think it would just be better off, if you have a subscriber and they're paying you every month, and they're not pulling down more streams than they pay for or what they just, to me, it's just like, forget about it. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I've had the same thing with Netflix, actually, just,
And
with our last move.
it almost seems to come down to the type of device. Can the device natively be attached via HDMI to a television? Because a
Yeah.
Roku can, a Mac can, a Windows computer can, and it seems like those are the devices that cause the most consternation on Netflix part versus an iPhone or an iPad, which seems like it would be far easier to abuse than
Yeah.
something that requires that extra step of connecting it to a TV. But because we had a Roku and connected that Roku to a TV, forget it. I'm a dirty, rotten, stinking thief. All right.
Well, you are, but I mean, that's beside the point.
Climbing off my soapbox. So here's the big question, and we're going to end on this, Brian. When you consider the cost of each of of each service and all the services that you might need or want to subscribe to in order to have a similar experience to cable or satellite, and I don't know if you'll have an answer for this, can cord cutting actually save you money?
I think it's a very individual question because you brought up what are you watching, how often are you watching. One thing I would consider too is if it is thinking of it from the sports aspect of it, what is in season during that time too, where there's an off season where you may not care about that at all. So when you factor all those in, I never consider adding a cable or satellite subscription. So I would say yes. I think you can economically make that decision where you can get what you want when you want to get what you want for a lower price than subscribing to cable or satellite.
Whether it's commercial supported or not commercial supported, which by the
Yeah.
way, even if you have a commercial free plan with Hulu or whatnot, if there are sports, you're going to get commercials.
Correct.
We
yeah.
should probably mention that too at the very end. Now that we've talked about all that, we should probably mention that even if you have a commercial free plan, you are going to get commercials during sporting events.
Commercials.
And it almost sometimes it's funny with those commercials you bring up because sometimes almost like I miss the cable satellite style or your local channels commercials
Yeah.
because it almost seems like there's only 2 or 3 sponsors and it's those same 2 or 3 sponsors that you see over and
Yeah.
over for
Yeah,
every
that's-
single.
That's true.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and I mean, there's whole other topics that we can broach here, and I think we'll call it a day on cord cutting for now. But maybe we'll have you on and we'll talk about things like I know there's a term for it, and I don't know the term right off the top of my head, but where you subscribe to a service just to binge watch a few shows at a time, and then you cancel and you move to the next service and you subscribe to it.
Yeah, like what I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly if you're doing something like that, you are going to save a bunch of money.
Yeah.
If you're lazy like me and you just stay subscribed to the services, you will end up paying for those services every month. But what I found in my case anyway is because the quality of television is so much higher, I'm often discovering shows that I might not have discovered just having
Otherwise.
cable or just having satellite or just having over-the-air antenna. I'm willing to take a chance on something because I've watched everything else, and now I'm like, what else can I watch?
Mhm.
And you end up finding shows that you never ever would have discovered previously. So, yeah, I think there's definitely an argument to be made for saving money by cord cutting, and definitely an argument to be made for broadening the choices that you have in
Mhm.
terms
Well,
of the television that you watch.
yeah, and I think too, especially with DirecTV, and I don't know what the subscriber count is or anything, but there is a theory, or maybe it's more than a theory. I think because I've read this in a few different spots that it as people start jumping ship for cord cutting, providers like DirecTV, which is odd. They offer this great deal to a new customer, but their loyal customers, they just keep jacking
Mhm.
up the price.
Right.
And the big reason is because you're the last few that are still on the ship, so you're picking up for all the people leaving rather than
That's right.
which seems really sort of backwards. But I mean, I can understand it, but I think from that standpoint, um, it almost seems like, especially, I guess, depending upon how you do it, how couldn't you save money, by cord cutting? If you're
Right.
if you're paying 160, 170 a month for DirecTV, and yes, there will probably be some channels and some sports or whatever that you won't be able to get or will be really hard to get. But there's probably you probably would have to subscribe to a whole bunch of stuff to get up to that, and by that point, you'll have way more than you'll have. You'll have way more to watch. Let's put it that way, more that you want to watch than you ever would by staying on something. And again, I'm not trying to bash cable companies or satellite, but yeah,
Well, and even like the portability of what you want to watch too. Where you're able
yeah,
to, you know, if you're commuting on a train or something like that, and you can maybe watch it easier than if you were a traditional cable customer.
right,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Right.
It's a really good point.
Okay. There's one more thing to talk about this episode, Brian. It's something that we've been doing since January. In January, Eric and I did our annual Essential Apps episode where we list the apps that we find most indispensable on our Macs and just really enjoy sharing with others. And we realized that we had so many apps to talk about that we were going to keep introducing new apps as the year went on. And as we've had guests on the show, we've had Darren on a couple times, and he shared some of his essential apps with us. We thought, hey, with Brian coming on, maybe Brian has an essential app he would like to share with us. So you said yes. So what
Mhm.
app would you like to share with the listeners this episode?
Sure. Yeah, this is an app that I definitely, probably the very first one that I install when I get a new Mac, MacUpdater. I think
Oh,
it's indispensable. Uh,
Oh
it
yeah,
provides you the ability to quickly see, what apps need to be updated. You can dig into each one to see what those updates are, and before you click to update. But yeah, sometimes otherwise, it's the worst feeling when you go to open an app and it gives you that you want to use it right away, or you need to use it right away, and you get that dialogue screen saying you need to update first.
yeah.
And you're like, oh well, never mind. I guess I got to update first. I'll be, if it's a thing that you're working with other people on, you might not be able to contribute or help for the next 5-10 minutes maybe, depending on how big the update is. So being able to do that, I think, is really helpful. So MacUpdater.
and is there a cost to MacUpdater, or is it a free app, or how does someone find this?
You know what? That is a great question. So I will I got the link, and I will take a
Is it
look. It starts
is it
off with
from
they've
Mac Update?
Mac Updater, um, code or corecode.io, and
Oh,
there's
it's
the
different than
link.
I thought.
And let me see the pricing. Pricing on there. So Standard edition, I believe, is $8.97. So not too bad. They have
Oh wow.
additional editions of it too, but it's extremely helpful. They do, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they give you maybe like 20 updates for free just to kind of see how the particular application works. If you're happy with it, you can always discontinue using it. But yeah, it's a very reasonable price. They do offer they have a family price and a business price and stuff like that too. But yeah, I found it very useful.
They must have a pretty extensive database if they can, go through your Mac and find, I presume, not only Mac App Store apps, but third-party apps as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. And some are you're able to update directly from their app, and then others will just say, click to open up your, the App Store app on your Mac.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Take that, iPad OS.
Shoot, I just realized now when I got disconnected, I lost all of Brian's links that he put up there because I just grabbed the core code. So, will we have those in the show notes or?
Well, I am glad you mentioned that, Eric, because every single one of the things that we talked about this episode, Brian mentioned EarthCam, we mentioned the Olympics, he mentioned AntennaWeb. All of these links that Brian shared with us will be in the show notes for this episode. Yeah.
Oh yeah, just put them back up there. Thank you, Brian. And
Sure.
yeah, that's awesome.
Including a link to MacUpdater. That's corecode.io. I'll have to admit, I wasn't familiar with that one, but I'm definitely going to check it out because that's something that it's always the more esoteric apps that I don't use super frequently. That when I get a new Mac, I almost always at that point go through and see what still works, what doesn't work, what has the little no symbol over it, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And the bad thing is, I find that no symbol. And there is an update, but now I can't update it because the app won't run. So it becomes a whole thing to have to update all the apps that no longer work because I upgraded my operating system or upgraded the architecture or what have you. It sounds like something like MacUpdater is really what I need to keep all the Macs on my app up to date. Now, how does it work with an app that has paid updates? So, for example, when you have a major version update, will it just update it to the latest major version, or is it going to give you a little warning first and say, hey, there's an update for this, but it's a paid update?
I don't believe if it is a paid update, it won't allow you to circumvent the payment in that way. However,
no, but I wonder if you end up with an unlicensed version after it's updated. Because
it doesn't go. It sounds like it would. Does it always go through MacUpdater, the actual update, or does MacUpdater just say, "Hey, there's an update, like launch this app," and like it still goes through Sparkle through the app's updating system?
Oh, that's a good point.
I think my understanding is it doesn't open the app when I'm updating it, but I believe
it just tells you.
It must point. I think it points to maybe that location. I don't know on the back side of things how it's working. There are some apps that will open a dialog box once you click to update it. One that gets updated that seems like almost every day I run it is Zoom, and Zoom loves to. It'll say you'll go to update it, and then it'll pull open a dialog box from Zoom to update it from there. And then you confirm, with a password or biometrics, that type of thing, and then it'll go through the update. It does note though, like when it's a point update versus a point update, the smaller the update, you just press update and it goes right through. If it's a larger, like goes from a 1 point instead of going like 1.1.2, if it just goes 1.1 to 1.5 or something large, it'll actually like tell you, hey, this is a significant update. Are you sure you want to do this type thing? So it does kind of give you like a stop on that one if you almost want to pause and learn a little bit more about it. Yeah.
That that I can't imagine a service like this exists and has not thought of things like paid upgrades. So I'm sure it's addressed in a really nice, easy way. And it sounds like that's probably it, where it'll pop up and
Yeah.
warn, hey, are you sure you want to do this update? And if you just plow ahead and don't pay any attention to the fact that maybe you don't have the upgrade license for this, you're going to end up with a version that doesn't work when you're done. That's got to be how they tackle it. Oh, very
Yeah,
cool.
right.
Very cool. I'm going to have to check that out. And that's at, one more time, corecode.io/MacUpdater. Thanks, Brian. That's awesome.
Oh, sure. Yeah, my pleasure.
And with that said, that's going to do it for another episode of For Mac Guys Only. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Remember, we do love to get your letters, so if you have any comments about the show, a tip to share, or a software or hardware problem with your Mac, or you want to talk about any other happenings in the world of Apple, you can leave your thoughts in this week's show notes found at formacguysonly.com, or you can drop me a line, mike@formacguysonly.com. And do be sure to subscribe to the show's YouTube channel at youtube.com/FMEOTV and click the little notification bell so you can find out when we're going live. You can join the chat room and you can catch all the behind the scenes stuff that doesn't make the final cut of the show. Hey, Brian, I know you're on a few podcasts every week. What's the best way for folks to see you on the internet? What's the best way for folks to see you and to contact you if they'd like to reach out and say hi?
Appreciate it. Well, oftentimes on Tuesday evenings, 8 p.m. Eastern, I'm on Mac Voices Live as a panelist. And in addition to that, if you want to contact me, best way is probably on Mastodon, Brian8944 at mastodon.cloud.
Awesome. And Eric, what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
The usual, Eric at formacguysonly.com.
Very cool. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Thanks to Eric and Brian for joining me this episode. Stay subscribed, and we'll talk to you next time.